Okay.
Extremely. So what was really cool was, so I didn't get into the advanced music program at the college that I went to. It was a junior college in England, so it's sixth form college, right, for juniors and seniors, grades 11 to 12. And so I didn't get into the advanced music program, so I found my own opportunity. So I joined amateur orchestras. I went to festivals and did all sorts of playing.
That's the right place to do festivals.
It's terrific. And amateur musicians, too, they're everywhere. Every community has its own amateur orchestra.
Right.
And which, by the way, as an aside, we just started this season, the Windsor Symphony Community Orchestra. We have an orchestra of 50 volunteers who come once a week to the Capitol Theater here to play in an orchestra.
That's amazing.
Isn't that cool?
That's really cool.
So we can talk about that more later. But
yeah,
anyway,
please.
That's that. But so what I did in England was I played in amateur orchestras. I had friends who were musicians, and we'd have chamber music parties about once a month. I really made my own way.
I want to go to a chamber music party.
I know, right?
How does that, it's so interesting to me because it's kind of talking about the culture of music, right? When you get into groups like that, I made a joke once to a friend of mine, and I said that really the only difference between jazz musicians and rock musicians is how public they are about their alcoholism.
Right.
And to me, it's interesting because when you think about, or at least when I think about, and I should probably put it more on me than the general, but when I think about musicians, right, I think about musicians at a bar, and I think about what they would do afterwards and that idea.
Sure.
You hear about the rock style lifestyle and all that stuff.
Sure.
But to think about a group of classically trained musicians sort of cutting loose on their own. Talk to me about what that experience is like, because I imagine it's very, very much communal with rock musicians, but I can't imagine that there isn't some interesting things that go on there.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's where it stems from, and I didn't understand this completely at the time, but now I see it more and more. When a musician plays in an orchestra, they have a great experience. But in the orchestra setting, the conductor really has a lot of the last say in how things are phrased, how things come together, what to do, what not to do, right? There's a lot of, in a very short rehearsal period, there's a lot of instruction that a conductor will give out to the musicians. So musicians generally look for opportunities to perform without a conductor so they can have their own sort of sense of self, their own sense of bringing music together. And that's what we were doing. We would come together and we would perform early Haydn symphonies or chamber music pieces that didn't require a conductor. And we would just make music together. And it usually focused around food. I mean, I was only 17 at the time, so it didn't really focus around alcohol, especially in my parents' house.
Right.
But it focused around food. Okay. And so we'd get together, we'd eat, we'd play some, we'd eat some more, we'd play some. And, it's just kind of a social thing, something that we had in common, right?
Did it feel more like practice than anything?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
Quite the opposite. It felt like we were playing together for fun, just for the fun of it. So we had no pressure of a concert coming up, no rehearsal, just playing to make music together and get to know each other.
Okay.
It was really fun. And so, I miss that aspect. And I think in our culture today, there's less of that than there used to be. And especially here, I mean, in England, I think it still exists a little bit more. But yeah, that culture of everybody plays an instrument and wanting to get together and make music together.
Right. It's interesting. To me, because the world seems so separate, right? They seem so diverted. But at the same time, anytime that, and I keep coming back to this point, I guess, but anytime that I've spent any time with musicians, you're just a bunch of musicians.
Absolutely.
It's the exact same thing. And I wonder and I mean, we'll continue with your story here, but I wonder, through your journey, did you feel that separation? Was being part of that club a thing to you, or was it not something you even thought about?
Well, no, I did, I think. And I think sometimes, so first of all, I felt like an outsider, especially in high school. And a lot of kids in high school feel like outsiders.
Sure.
I felt like an outsider because the school that I went to in North Carolina was not filled with kids who were studying music and being classically trained and really interested in that. So when I went to England, it was my first sort of exposure to a lot of people. And then when I eventually went to university the year after, then it was amazing. The whole world opened up because I was suddenly surrounded by hundreds of people who thought like I did.
I think that's a pretty common experience across the board,
so.
Right?
I think it is. And for me, it was pretty spectacular. I remember thinking, wow, I felt like a fish who'd been thrown back into the ocean and was finally breathing again. It was really, really nice.
That'll do it for this episode of the AVB Podcast. Don't forget you can subscribe to our full audio episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you find your audio podcasts. The full episodes, highlights, and our live off-the-floor performance videos can be found at our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the AVB Podcast. Of course, you'll find links to our incredible sponsors and this week's guest in the description below. The AVB Podcast is part of the Border City Network. Find more great content at bordercitynetwork.com. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.